For a conversation on who wins in the age of artificial intelligence, please welcome to the stage Paul Daugherty, author of Human and Machine, and Katica, the CEO of Pipeline Equity. Back to lead the conversation is the Atlantic's Derek Thompson.
Hello, good afternoon. The last time I was up here, I was here with Andrew Yang, and we talked about the coming of the robots, the fact that we were on the verge of a period of enormous technological change, and that we might see something like technological unemployment, vast numbers of people put out of work permanently because machines did human work so much better than humans. Is that the future, Paul, that you see coming, that we have this fleet of robots that are coming for us and that there's no way that we can compete with them? Or do you think that that's an ill-fitting frame for the economy of the future?
Yeah, one thing I talk about a lot is I think we need to reframe, just to use your word, reframe the discussion around the workforce and jobs and how we're applying technology. We write about this a lot, the book Human plus Machine that we published earlier this year, where we get into these issues. And it's a big question. We think it's a $1 trillion question for the US alone, because the research we did shows that we have a potential $1 trillion shortfall in ability to, for growth in the US alone, if we don't get the workforce structured right. And the way we frame it is by talking about collaborative intelligence. Too many of the discussions today are led by technology types who are talking about, and I say that being a geeky technologist, technology types who are talking about the ability to use AI and other technology to replace people. So we have this AI to replace people discussion, then we have this discussion about how do we retrain the humans. Those are two poles of a discussion that's, I think, is misleading. The real question that we should be discussing is what are the new opportunities created in the middle? We call it collaborative intelligence, where you take the best of human capability and augment jobs with technology so that so that people can do work more effectively. And from the research we've done, if you look at jobs overall, across all the categories, we've broken this down by category of job as well, but if you look at the workforce overall in the US as an example, about 10% of the work that's done, about 10% of the work hours and work that's done is human only, is not going to be replaced at all. About half the work, 50% overall, can be augmented. It still needs to be done by humans, but can be augmented with technology. And about 40% can be replaced. So when you look at it, the majority of the work will remain in the hands of humans, being done by humans, being done with tools that allow us to do it more effectively. And that's the way we think you need to frame the discussion.
Just a quick follow-up. Human plus machine is an additive formula that someone could have used to describe the economy in the mid-1500s, in the mid-1700s, the mid-1900s. So what's going to change, if anything, is going to change fundamentally? Is the technological revolution that's coming so different from the technological revolutions that happened after the commercialization of the steam engine, the commercialization of cars and electricity? What's so different about this
In some ways,
future?
it's not different, because with every I study this stuff a lot. I'm on the board of the Computer History Museum and study a lot of these technology things. With every wave of technology, back to the Stone Age and the invention of weapons, stone axes and chisels and things, humans have both feared and been fascinated by technology. That's the way we enter into every technology that comes across. And the same is true of AI. We're both fascinated by the potential, and we're fearing the implications of it. So in that sense, it's no different than the past. The difference, though, that we do have to think about is it's coming faster. So AI, the growth of AI is the fastest technology trend we've seen in our business. I've been in this industry over 30 years. With all these changes we've seen in the internet and everything else, the change that we're seeing in companies and the workforce and in our own business is faster than any of those other technologies. So the pace is different than we've seen before. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that the technology is getting more to the essence of what it means to be human. And that causes us to rethink our relationship with technology. The phrase I use is that technology is moving from something we use, whether it be a tool or whether it be a phone or whether it be a computer that you can set aside, to technology is who we are. It's the essence of the human experience. The technology is changing us, and therefore we need to think more carefully about the application of it. That's the other part of Human plus Machine, is how do we reflect the changing human experience with technology in the shape of these new jobs and how we train people and educate people for the new jobs.
Great. So When I think about algorithms, I think about a technology that can amplify human biases, make us even worse than we are without the computer, or an algorithm that can correct human biases. So tell us a little bit about how your company works to use AI not to amplify our human biases when we're making decisions like hiring, one of the more important decisions in the economy, but rather to identify the ways in which we're biased and help us be more rational in these decisions.
Yes. So what Pipeline does, and Pipeline was founded on the idea of the economics of gender equity, which is whether or not people believe it's an issue or they do, it's actually fundamentally a massive economic opportunity. And the core of what the Pipeline platform does is actually intercept HR decisions across the 5 pillars of talent, so hiring, pay, performance, potential, and promotion, provide recommendations, and then quantify those recommendations in terms of revenue.
So if I'm a company and I want to use a hiring algorithm to make my hiring process better, to be smarter about figuring out which young worker has the most potential, what is a way in which this technology helps me do that? Like, how do you write a formula for human potential? That strikes me as a pretty difficult job.
It is a difficult job. That's why we exist. So, and it is a lot of what you talk about in terms of augmented decision making. So, so in your HR platforms, and you typically have at least 2. You have a core HR platform and an applicant tracking system. You may have even more. There's a lot of data, and there's a lot of data about your talent. And what we do is when you are actually going to make a decision as defined by an action that you actually take, you post a job requisition, you submit a pay proposal, you write a performance review, our system actually will intercept that decision, provide a recommendation back to you in terms of what you could do to make the most equitable decision and the best decision for your company.
Give me an example. When we were talking backstage, we talked a little bit about performance reviews.
Right.
And how sometimes performance reviews, well, tell us a little bit about how your technology can essentially read performance reviews and help bosses give more helpful and less biased feedback.
Yeah, so there's a lot of talk in the world about the gender pay gap, and I'll get to performance reviews because the 2 are connected. And that is often talked about because it's quantifiable, right? So we can say women earn on average 80% of what men, 80 cents on the dollar, et cetera. But that's actually the symptom, it's not the disease. If you want to look at it that way, in terms of the value decisions that you make about your talent upstream in terms of performance and potential actually are the value that you're placing on your talent before you ever get to pay. Once you get to pay, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. So one of the things that when we process performance reviews, so you write a performance review, you submit it, that actually comes through the Pipeline platform. We use natural language processing to actually read through the performance reviews, find biased phrases, make recommendations about how you might want to change those.
Give me an example of a biased phrase.
One of the things we talked about backstage was, and this is more subtle, right? So this is more of a microaggression, but talking about someone being moody. Right, so that would be an example, or always being helpful. That's another thing that we assign to people, right? So, and then the other thing that we look at is we will look at the rating. So look at how you're actually rating people based on what you've written, and ensure the equitable application of those ratings.
Right, Paul. I can understand how a lawyer might use AI in order to, read a bunch of documents faster, or how a radiologist might use AI in order to, diagnose an MRI really quickly. The fastest growing jobs in this country, though, are home health aides, personal care aides, retail workers. Is there a place for this, for the blue-collar workforce, the emerging lower-paying workforce? Is there a way for them to use or train with AI now so that they'll be prepared for the jobs of the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Just one comment on what we just talked about, though. I think I just want to comment that the inclusion and tools to focus on inclusion and representation of the workforce, I think, are essential to the type of what I was talking about as well in terms of where the jobs come from. Because if you believe that technology is who we are, not what we use, then we better have an inclusive workforce, both developing the technology and an inclusive workforce ready to benefit from the technology. So what Pipeline is doing and getting these tools into companies to make sure we have an inclusive approach going forward is really critical to the jobs we'll talk about. Now, to your question on where do we see these types of jobs, and they're distributed across the workforce. And one of the things that we need to look at is the different types of jobs that AI is creating. And there's new families of jobs. So we talk in the book about 6 new categories of jobs that represent millions and millions of jobs in the economy. And they're go by names like trainer, explainer, sustainer, amplifier. They're new types of jobs that we need to prepare people for differently that add value in companies. To give you a specific example from the energy industry, take a oil rig operator who might be operating an oil rig or a fracking rig. Today, that job is a technician who's operating dials and gears to drive the drill a mile underground and operate the drill. At some point, the drill breaks. Turns out the drill has hundreds of sensors in it, sending terabytes of data back up continuously. But that data is going to the back office of the company that's looking at analysis of what's happening. Well, instead, let's use AI and machine learning. Let's create a dashboard using a gaming engine that actually visualizes the drill underground. It shows the torque on the drill bit, which the technician can understand. It shows the heat of it, which shows its propensity to break. It shows the tensile resistance coming from the ground. And the technician now, using their skills of how a drill bit operates, is making the decisions for the company on how to best operate that drill and avoid it breaking in the first place, pushing decision-making and a more interesting job for that technician and a more valuable job to that person as they restructure the way the work is done. That's why we talk about, again, in the book, the subtitle is Reimagining Work. You have to reimagine these jobs. The technician isn't going to lose their job in that case. The technician is going to have a job that's more fulfilling, more interesting, that they're excited about. And when we look at that segment of the workforce, we saw optimism from AI and other technologies. 65% of workers believe they have more career opportunity coming from AI. Only half of that number believes their company is giving them the right tools they need to prepare themselves for it, but they believe and are optimistic about the career impact that they can get from the technology.
Right, it's interesting. So you're talking about how occupations are going to change, and you're at the front lines looking at how people are being hired. What I'd love to know is, based on this vision of AI being introduced increasingly to the economy, how that's going to change the industrial mix of the US economy. What will we as workers be doing more of, and what will we as workers be doing less of? Because that's what these technological revolutions do. Like in the early 20th century, 35% of Americans worked on farms. By the mid-1950s, 35% of Americans worked in factories. And we moved from farms to factories, and now from factories to the service economy. But what you're talking about is how a lot of workers at the front lines are going to be empowered with data or with skills in a way that they weren't necessarily in the 1980s or 1990s. So if we can think a little bit expansively here, how do either of you think these kind of technologies are going to change the sort of work that Americans are going to be doing? How is that going to change?
I'll just start with a broad answer, that the fundamental thing we have to get our minds wrapped around is we have to stop training people to be machines, which is still what we do in the educational system and still what we do in a lot of corporate environments. We design organizations, assume people operate like machines, and we train people to be like machines. And the big shift here, as you look at the work that people are doing in the future, they're doing more human work. When we look at all these categories of jobs and the skills that are needed to do them in the future, the top skills that we need to train for any of these jobs, from the oil driller to the management worker to the healthcare support workers, it's things like complex problem solving, creativity, sensory perception, social and emotional response. Those types of things are at the core of these new jobs. Even for an engineer or that technician, it's those types of skills more than the technical skills. So there's been a lot of discussion at this conference about developing the technical skills for the economy of the future. We do need more technical skills, but we need far more human skills injected in these jobs that understand how to incorporate technology and the experience they have as they do their jobs. And so the big shift, I think, is these jobs look a lot more human, is probably the simple way to say it.
Katica, what do you think?
I agree. I agree. My microphone is not behaving, but I agree. And we were actually talking backstage, because I actually chose, I have 2 children, and I chose to send them to a school that has, one of their #1 things is social emotional development, because I know that they will go into jobs that don't even exist today, but social emotional development and their ability to do that actually will set them up for success in the future, because they will be able to adapt to what's happening. And so if you think about where management and schools are, they're very much in it's a very process industrial revolution, being on an assembly line type thinking. That's where modern management actually came from. So management in the future, and in the not too distant future, is not going to look like that, right? And schools shouldn't either, because that's what we're preparing our kids in the future for. And so if we're going to augment that, we need to augment it, and much like the article you wrote about artificial intelligence, because it does have its limits, right? And we need humans to augment that.
And just one other point on that, because there was a discussion I saw earlier today about that I think was really good discussion on a lot of new educational pathways we need, not everybody needing to go to 4-year institutions, more community college apprenticeships. I completely agree with that. We need more continuous career learning. I think that's the biggest change we need, to change governmental incentives for continual career learning, and businesses, give businesses the mandate and to get businesses on board with training their workers continuously. In the research we did, two-thirds of executives across 1,500 organizations globally, 2/3 said their workforce isn't ready for AI and the implications of AI. 3% said they're investing in increased training to help the workers, which is a striking and unacceptable gap. I think it's because the businesses aren't evil. They don't, but they don't believe it's their problem. They think it might be somebody else's problem, or they don't know what to train people in. So we need to really get on that issue.
So the title of this is my last question until we go to Q&A. The title of this segment is Who Wins? I want to flip that on its head. I wonder if either of you think there is a category of workers, an occupation, or an industry that you think will lose because of their lack of preparation for the technological revolution that's coming, or because there's tech that's coming that everyone can use, but other companies are going, or other industries are going to learn how to use it better than they will. So who's going to lose from this revolution that we're talking about?
I don't think we know yet. That's the short answer.
Very honest. Very disappointing.
I know, I'm sorry, we want a clear answer, but that, and there's 2 reasons why we don't know that. One is how we're actually going to deal with the gaps that are here and that are accelerating in terms of the skills that we need people to have in order to fill the jobs that are here today as well as in the future, right? So how are we either doing that as companies, but better yet, how are we doing that as a collective, right? Because I think to your point about companies not actually spending money on human capital development, it is actually better if they all come together and figure out how to do that as a collective. That would be one. The second is who's behind the programming of the artificial intelligence and the technology. So we have seen that if we are unaware of the bias in the data sets, the training data sets that we use to train our algorithms, those algorithms will be biased, right? I mean, Amazon had that issue where they had an AI hiring app that they had to shut down because they weren't aware of the fact that it was basically biasing toward men. So the critical issue of getting representation in technology is not only an issue of fairness, it is fundamentally about the issue of will we decide by not having representation to program our biases into the future world? That's the question, and we can decide that right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was the right answer. We don't know, but I'll take a crack at a couple of things. One is. I think one group that stands to lose out a lot is the mid-career workforce that is displaced, because there will be jobs, in spite of what I said earlier with some optimism about jobs, there are jobs that will be automated and replaced, and people will be put out of work because of the impacts of AI. And we think it's somewhere in the order of 15% of jobs that are at risk, but some number, whatever you think that number is. How are those people that have been educated in something that's no longer relevant and are already in the workforce going to be retrained? And that's the big challenge, and that's what I really worry about a lot. We've donated all the proceeds of the book to nonprofits that are focused on mid-career reskilling, because we think that's the biggest unsolved problem and biggest risk, both to the workforce as well as political stability and other things if we don't get that one right here in the US. That's a part of the workforce we're concerned about. Physical labor, when you look at the physical labor category, which is defined as hands-on assembly work and things, there's a mixed impact there. I think that workforce is a lot at risk because of automation, but it also has a lot of opportunity in the US because collaborative robotics and other technologies are making certain forms of assembly and manufacturing cost-effective and productive in the US that had been offshored previously. So we see in some industries the opportunity to rebalance that equation.
I think we have time for one question. Any hands? Got one in the back.
Hi, my name is Joemi, and my question is around, we talked a lot about human skills, soft skills today. I'm just wondering, what can companies do today to upskill their workforce around these types of skills for the current and future workforce? So
my perspective on that is that the work that Brené Brown and Martin Seligman and the positive psychology actually has a lot to do with that. So that sense of creating brave workplaces that create a sense of belonging where people can be heard and valued. So it's sort of less about the things maybe that I learned about when I first came into the workforce about conflict resolution, right? And more about truly how can we see people and hear people and value the diversity of our opinions. And I think that that's what is needed and create that sense of vulnerability and bravery in order to truly create the workforce that we need in terms of social emotional development, and also to trust machines. Because if you're talking about augmented decision making, you are fundamentally talking about a machine that you're interacting with. That requires a new set of social emotional development skills to be able to do that.
Yeah, the question is who will benefit from AI or who will win with AI. I think the way I'd position is the best investment in AI that you can make with AI is invest in people. So back to to answer your question, it's investing in the people, and I think it's basic digital skills for those who don't have them, and then the type of skills you develop. You mentioned for those that need to kind of develop the more human side of their skills, and thinking about lifelong learning platforms in companies. The Walmart example earlier I thought was a good example of investing in people and training in different ways. And I think the lifelong learning thing is a big deal because jobs are changing continuously. There's no doubt that jobs are being transformed radically. The companies that think that they don't have to invest in their workforce and they'll be able to go hire the workers of the future are going to be sadly disappointed. Yeah. And they're going to have massive business disruption because if you don't prepare your workers for the changes, there's not going to be a workforce ready for it. So it's incumbent on business to to take these investments, and in some places basic digital skills, in some places more advanced skills to get the workers ready for the future.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you.